I'm not Sonic! I'm my original character!
Okay.
Alright, how's it going, guys? So we're back today for the long-awaited Silvia guide. It's been in the laboratory, in the works for, I guess, about 2 weeks right now. I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus because I was camping for the weekend, I suppose, but hopefully it lives up to the hype. But just diving right into it, Silvia's the racer. She plays a lot like Tracer, and good luck trying to outpace her. If you like adrenaline-pumping, high-octane offensive play, then she might just be the character for you. Silvia is a blunt specialist whose mobility and immediate burst damage has pretty much solidified her as one of the more consistent tempo-based characters in the game. So let's get into her strengths and weaknesses here. So for strengths, she's got very, very high mobility, so she's always happy kind of jumping between locations, moving in and out between combat and between building her items. Rush Stay is just an incredible ability for basically keeping her on the move, keeping her offenses notable and her defenses building, I suppose is what you could say. She has very high burst damage potential, and there's a distinction between burst damage and kind of sustained damage. Sustained damage is a bit more consistent damage over a longer period of time. Burst damage is you can deal an insanely large amount of damage. The damage drops off very quickly, but you are able to deal a lump sum of damage very, very quickly, and that's extremely effective when you are talking about shorter engagements, and especially at the very beginning of an engagement. I mentioned the damage kind of drops off a little bit after her kind of initial engagement, but by that time your opponent's health bar is pretty much low enough to the point where the drop-off damage isn't going to be noticeable enough, I suppose. And just the fact that you get the jump on them often kind of puts them in a situation where they can't react very well. A lot of times you can kind of dive into a fight against a person, kind of blitz for a large amount of damage, and then follow up with a couple of normal hits before they even really have time to react. And at that time, they basically just have to kind of retreat, because you're not really going to be able to fight you're not going to be able to fight Silvia on basically on those terms right there, because your health is going to be very low. You're going to be kind of really caught by surprise. And that's something she really excels with, is dealing these large sums of damage by surprise and catching your opponent off guard. And that's kind of what she excels in, like I said. And that kind of follows into the idea of she's able to kind of bully people out of locations very quickly. She doesn't really like to stick in the locations that she bullies people out as often, because people can return after that and they'll know your abilities are on cooldown and stuff like that. But she can, based on kind of the large sums of damage she can deal as quickly as she can deal, she can basically clear people out of an area very quickly. Moving on to kind of her weaknesses, she's actually really weak in the early game. Her damage output doesn't start to be kind of very good until she's kind of assembled some of her basic gear, until she's assembled a little bit of a buffer region for her to kind of go out and start being offensive. So really, really early in the game, she starts out very kind of weak, both offensively and defensively. Less so defensively, I suppose, but her offenses aren't really that good when you just start the game. So when you're meeting up against people, if you're meeting up against other kind of offensive tempo-based characters, they're going to kind of if you try to 1v1 them, you're often going to kind of lose out on that 1v1. So she takes kind of a lot of support to kind of get the ball rolling. I think once she gets the ball rolling, she can be quite effective, and like I said, she just has a lot of options kind of at her disposal to keep the momentum on her side, to keep the ball rolling. But she has a bit of a struggle to kind of get that ball rolling at the very, very beginning, especially against kind of other offensive based momentum based characters. Another kind of pretty big weakness for her is kind of her abilities are difficult to synergize. So if you want to be kind of comboing in Blitz and Rush to kind of get the synergy that you get when you use them both, they're kind of difficult to time. It takes a little bit of micromanagement and a little bit of practice to get the hang of them. So that's another weakness. Just kind of they're a little bit difficult to kind of they're a little bit difficult to kind of get the fullest potential out of them. So in general, she kind of has favorable matchup versus characters who kind of hate getting harassed, characters that prefer an extended fight. So characters like Cecilia or Kara are the characters that first come to my mind. Silvia is kind of most effective when these characters are kind of at their weakest. So if you think about Cecilia, she's most effective when she's got a full pain stack. She's really not that effective when she's got a very low pain stack. So the fact that Silvia can come in and deal this large amount of burst damage before she gets that pain stack up, it's a really easy way to kind of get around characters like that. And the same thing kind of goes for Kiara. She's most effective when she can kind of utilize both her abilities, and based on how quickly the fights are going to be going with Silvia and how kind of upfront and in your face they're going to be, she's able to kind of deal with characters like Kiara as well, because like I said, Kiara is not going to be able to kind of utilize both her abilities as effectively against Silvia. She can also have favorable matchups versus late game characters, but this is the same story for basically any aggressive character. They can have favorable matchups versus late game characters, but only if they effectively interrupt the growth of these characters throughout the game, throughout the mid game, primarily throughout the early game, and into the beginning of the late game. If you can kind of harass them and kind of stunt their growth effectively, then you'll be able to come out on top of them at the very end. But if you aren't able to harass them, and if they have kind of free reign to build up and set themselves up for the late game, then you're going to have a very hard time breaking through those characters, because that's when those characters shine, that's when those characters excel, is in the late game, once they've got themselves set up, once they've accumulated all these things without being kind of harassed, without being punished, without being kind of dealt with. That's kind of when those characters shine, and those characters can start easily overtaking the offense characters, even offense characters who built a lot of momentum. And then, of course, in the offense versus offense matchup, in general, the winner is usually kind of decided on by which one. It's generally decided by kind of like one early fight against the two of them. Kind of depends on is going to be kind of showing who kind of takes the momentum early in the game. Because there's going to be a point where even if two offensive characters are scaling pretty evenly, there's going to be a point where they come and they kind of face head to head. And usually that first initial encounter is going to be what decides who takes the momentum overall, because one's going to be put very, very much forward, and the other's going to be put very, very much backwards, and it's going to be very hard for them to come back. And in general, they're not going to be able to come back just in this, like I said, this offense versus offense scenario. And like I said, that's pretty much true for all tempo-based characters in general. And there's kind of for playing these offense-based characters, there's generally an emphasis on getting a quick and effective weapon, and then kind of building items in reaction, building your armors, building your accessories, building even food items and stamina items. You kind of want to build them in reaction to where you're going, because where you're going to be going is going to be trying to follow the fight, follow where the engagements are, follow where all the noises are, follow where people are, because if you're not in the fight, you're not building the mastery. So you want to kind of play reactionary. So you want to be in the fight, and then you don't want to have to go out of your way after that to get items. So if you're at a location, build what armors, build what items you can from those locations. And those locations, like I mentioned, are going to be kind of predetermined by where the fights are, where the aggression is, where characters are making noises, where you're basically pulled off to as an offense character. So I'm going to break down kind of her abilities right here. So people say this a lot about Silvia kind of all the time, so this really isn't anything very new to say about her, and it kind of mirrors what kind of a lot of offense characters play, but this kind of applies more so to her, but she plays a very hit and run type strategy. Her abilities, her stats, everything's kind of tailored towards this kind of playstyle. And this generally has to do with, like I mentioned before, she's generally most effective when she can open up a fight with Blitz, especially when she can combo it off of Rush. So she's very, very effective when she can just kind of enter into a fight really quickly, kind of out of nowhere, take everyone by surprise, throw up a Blitz, follow up with a normal attack, maybe a second normal attack, maybe start the battle with a normal attack, kind of bluff that Blitz on cooldown, follow up with a Blitz, and then follow up with a normal attack. She's very effective when she can deal these high instances of burst damage very, very quickly, when she can combo it off Rush as well. But like I mentioned before, they kind of fall off. The damage, the high instances of damage isn't sustained over a long period of time, so she's going to have very high potential to deal a very high amount of damage early, but the longer the fight goes, the less overall damage she's going to be dealing. So for people who don't know, I want to really quickly kind of go over the combo potential between these abilities. I think people know that there is combo potential, but people don't really have the numbers down pat, I suppose. I guess Silvia mains know this, but I'm going to really quickly kind of give a really quick overview of the abilities. So obviously there's two modes to be using Blitz. The first is outside of Rush mode, in which she deals 10 additional skill damage. And while she's in Rush mode, there's the second mode, which is 2 plus her level times 2 in skill damage. And this damage scales very high very quickly based off your level, so the higher level is going, the higher your damage instances are going to get. So when you start getting to high levels, you're really going to want to be comboing this off for basically her maximum effectiveness. Because, like I said, it's based off of your level, these two abilities are equivalent in damage when she's at level 4. So it's level 4 times 2 plus 2, that's going to be equaling 10 additional skill damage. So at level 4, comboing into it means nothing. Level 4 and below, it's much better just to go for a dry Blitz at the end of the day. But once you start increasing past level 4, the damage is going to start getting noticeable. The additional damage that you get when comboing it off of Rush is going to start getting significantly noticeable. And I say significantly, I suppose, but every small instance of damage really matters for an offense character. Every little bit counts at the end of the day. So level 6, she's going to be hitting for 14 damage, which is it doesn't seem like that much difference from the kind of the base damage, but 14 damage still is a pretty it's a nice kind of additional extra bit of damage. It's like it's almost 50% extra boost. It essentially is a 50% boost in damage from the base, which is pretty nice. At level 8, you're hitting up to 18, which is coming pretty close to being twice as much damage as you would have gotten with the base damage. And at level 10, which is kind of where it averages out into the late game, she's going to be dealing about 22 additional skill damage from Blitz if she's comboing that off of Rush. So obviously you're going to want to be making use of the synergy between these abilities as often as you can, as much as you can. Entering into a fight with a Blitz boosted from Rush is very, very effective, deals very high instances of damage. And because the cooldown for Blitz is really quite long, like for an offensive tool, it's really a very long cooldown. It's like about twice as long as like revenge play. So looking at it like that, especially considering that she's most effective when she can enter into a combat with Blitz, that cooldown is really pretty long. It really is pretty exceptional. So for that reason, into the late game, you really are going to want to be trying to combo it off as often as possible. Obviously, don't put yourself in a bad situation trying to get it off. Don't like move 3 times just to activate Rush when you have an opportunity to go after someone in another area, because maybe they're going to be gone by the time you've activated Rush, and you've just used probably more stamina than you're going to really be saving by moving around those 3 times. It's going to be 15 stamina when you could just move from that area to the other without activating Rush. So you have to be smart. You have to be smart with stuff like with activating your abilities. You have to be smart with using your abilities, but as I mentioned, it's hard to synergize these abilities, but you are definitely going to want to be getting the hang of synergizing them, and you're going to want to get into kind of the habit of kind of bouncing them off each other as often as you can. I talked about Blitz a lot right there. I want to talk about Rush really quickly as well. So Rush state is kind of set up so it's set up so you have time to basically search 3 empty areas, and if you find nothing, move back to your original area. Or you have time to kind of move into a location, blitz your opponent, follow them up with a normal attack, maybe a second normal attack, and then you've still got time to generally leave that area and go back to your initial area that you were in the first place. And this is relevant because basically Rush State lets you transition from more conservative play into a more offensive play. It lets you kind of transition between these play styles. So while you're building for your weapon, while you're building up your weapon, while you're crafting, maybe you're in the middle of crafting armors, maybe you're in the middle of doing something, maybe you're in the middle of kind of restocking health or stamina items. It lets you kind of transition from this place, not really play style, but this mindset into a more offensive mindset by just giving you that offensive giving you those options to kind of jump around between areas. And it's kind of like I kind of like to kind of liken it to Hunter Trap a little bit, because Hunter Trap basically gives you it gives you notifications when people are in areas, right? So it's very useful in building up early mastery if people aren't making a lot of noise in other areas. If people aren't making a lot of noise for you to kind of go after them. Rush mode is really nice in the same kind of regard, because it gives you basically a few free moves through. It gives you, like I said, about 3, I guess I'd say on average, 3 moves to areas, and then obviously you're going to be searching those areas at least once. So it gives you basically free mobility between a few areas, and lets you kind of check those areas. And if you run into somebody on the way, that's obviously what you're trying to get, right? And the odds of finding someone in 3 locations is pretty high in itself. So it's nice in that sense, because you can really build up mastery really quickly by kind of constantly flushing out the areas, constantly flushing out the people, trying to find people, and like I said, entering into these combats with Blitz, ideally comboed off of a Rush state. And like I said, moving between these 3 areas is you're going to be in Rush state. So moving between these areas is going to give you ample opportunity to try to combo off your Blitz off of the Rush state. So in general, kind of the biggest thing I would say for Silvia, for kind of how to use Silvia, and it's kind of a principle that, like I mentioned before, applies to a lot of different offensive characters, applies to pretty much the majority of offensive characters, but it applies more so It applies more so to her, I think, because she needs, like I said, she's very weak at the very beginning of the game, so she needs to build her weapons. She needs to build her kind of rudimentary gear very, very quickly. But once you build your rudimentary gear, you're going to want to be interrupting people's growth. You're going to want to be harassing people. You're going to want to be dealing damage, and you're going to want to be doing that as much as possible. And like I said, playing your armor reactionary based off what you get. So a lot of the gear that you're going to be creating is going to be gear that you get from very high traffic areas, because high traffic areas are going to be high mastery gaining areas, I suppose, if that makes any sense. But you just have to keep in mind that it's very hard for her to play aggressively if she has not gotten some rudimentary form of weapon very quickly in the game. So a lot of her weapon options are very accessible, I think. I find she can get her weapons fairly quickly, and I think blunt weapons are just good in general, so a lot of times that isn't the problem, but you have to be careful about playing too offensively before you have a weapon or before you have resources that can really sustain that offensive push. So let's talk about her roots really quick. And like I said, offensive characters rely more on playing their root reactionary than playing their root in kind of a planned, measured way to play it. But I'll go over kind of a rudimentary route that I would recommend using for her. I think a lot of blunt mains would kind of attest to this fact as well, that kind of beam tonfa is one of the better blunt weapons you can use. So this route is going to be following that. It's going to be following a much more offensively oriented way of getting this weapon than you would see with Heart. I think there's a lot of Heart guys, and there's a lot of, I think Ziu from the Discord as well. Her Heart guy is probably one of the better Heart guides. I think she's one of the better Heart players we have in the Discord. So I think she would, I think her, you can see from her guide, it's much more of a conservative build. It's much more of a kind of sustained build. And she starts off at the chapel in that sense. And she starts off and she gets a lot of recovery items. She can piece the chapel, which is one of the kind of bigger things for Heart players that they can do. Is basically a Heart player can start wherever they want, and they don't have to care about anybody. So she likes to start at the chapel. The Heart players like to start at the chapel. I think I've tried it just to kind of see how it would work, and I don't really like using Silvia starting at the chapel, because I like kind of a more a more reliable way of getting the starter weapon, and I find it very hard to do starting with her, like starting with the blunt weapon that you start, the very basic blunt weapon. I find it very hard to kind of contest the chapel, especially with the amount of people that are there, especially without kind of gaining any momentum prior. So I find it harder to start the chapel with Silvia. So I always start off at the pond, and I like I say, for a lot of offensive characters, there's a lot of the things you want to focus on early game with offensive characters for getting is your weapon. That goes without saying, obviously, and then recovery items. I think recovery items are very, very important for sustaining your offensive momentum and keeping your aggression in peak condition. So the pond is a very nice place to start for that. You can get a lot of food items very, very quickly off the bat. So the main benefit for starting at the pond over starting any other area is you have first dibs on the carp. A lot of times, because carp is such a quickly upgraded food item, right? So a lot of times, if you go into the pond later in the game, the majority of the carps are going to be gone. So starting at the pond is very, very nice because you basically have first dibs on the carps. So you're going to want to go to the pond. You're going to basically be able to get a bunch of food items. You can even carry some of these food items and mix them with a cooking pot later if you have the space. You're going to be getting plastic bottles into water, which is going to give you the 1.5 liter water bottles as well, which is going to sustain your stamina for a very, very long amount of time as well, which is very, very nice. You can get the turtle shells, which I mentioned are very nice to be combining into the cooking pot later, but I also like to kind of try to hold on to a turtle shell for as long as I can, because I like the idea of making that into the turtle dabuk, into the dragon dabuk, I think it is. To making that into the late game is basically what I like to aim for with Silvia. All offensive characters, because like I said, offensive characters rely so heavily on momentum. So if you get injured with an offensive character, it spells doom for you, because you have to wait basically the full amount of time to get rid of your injury. A lot of times, I guess, like, offensive characters, if they get an injury, depending on what the injury is, they'll just kind of bite the bullet and stick with the injury for as long as they can. So the dragon clothes, for that reason, are just very, very nice for all offensively oriented characters. And it's very, very quick to make as well, especially along the route of the beam tonfa as well. That's something I'd like to mention. It's very quick to make that along the route. You can also get a box here, which boxes are always nice to wear. Like, for offensive characters that kind of don't really want to go too far out of their way to make a accessory early in the game, having the box is nice because it adds a little bit of extra armor, and it combos into a lot of different things for recovery items, which is very, very nice as well. And of course, obviously, we're going to be getting the short rod right here, because like I said, we're building this into the beam tonfa as soon as we can. So this is the starter weapon. A lot of times with offensive play, when you just find when you find the rod, you're going to just be taking that and then going, and you're not going to be spending a lot of time looking for all these other things. So all these items that I'm mentioning are items that if you have time, pick them up. The priority item here is basically the short rod, and I would say if you can get a carp as well, those would be the two priority items. If you can get those, I wouldn't wait around too late trying to get turtle shells, trying to get water bottles, trying to get things like that. I think if you can get a carp and if you can get a short rod, I think you should be generally fine overall. After this, you can move over to one of two areas, the alley and the hospital. I like going to the hospital because, like I mentioned, its health recovery items are always a important part of playing offensively, keeping kind of your offensive momentum up. And I know there's cooking pots at the alley, but I've always found they're very, very they're not rare, quote unquote, but they're not common items. They're not common items to find the cooking pot in the alley because there's only the two of them. So I think if you put all your eggs in one basket, hoping to get the cooking pot from the alley and use those to get your kind of only real recovery items, I find that's a bit of a gamble. So I like the hospital because you can kind of reliably get pills. You can use those with a box that your odds are you're going to be able to get in the pond before you get your other items. So I find that nice as well. And you can start building into your doctor's gown as well. But all that basically being out of the way, the reason the next kind of spot we're going to want to be going is to the hospital, is to the alley, is because we're looking for the cotton work glove to upgrade into our tonfa. After this, we basically just need to be getting steel, so the next two areas are kind of interchangeable. I prefer going to the wooded areas first, but anyways, you can in theory kind of interchange them. So the forest or the cemetery are the two places that I prefer because I like using steel. I like using all of an item when I craft up to it. So like I said, steel or iron sheets. I like using both of them when I upgrade them because you went out of your way to make them. You may as well get value with them. And going to the forest, I find, can give you that value because if you get a leather, then when you're in the slum, you can get a cloth and you can start upgrading to your battle boots, which is going to be really, really nice. It's very quick armor. It's very good armor. Not to mention if you get two leather, which granted, I find playing off the idea of getting two leathers is a bit of a risky prospect in itself, and you shouldn't hang around the forest trying to get multiple leathers, but if you can get two leathers, that's even better as well, because you can upgrade your turtle shell with when you get a cloth from the slum as well. But you can start upgrading your turtle shell, or not cloth. Sorry, what am I saying? You don't. The cloth is for the leg armor, obviously, but you can start upgrading your turtle shell into a shield, and you're gonna have extra steel for that as well. So I guess for a quick recap, I not really recap, but kind of explain what I was saying about the wooded areas. Basically, what you're primarily wanting from the wooded areas, being the forest or the cemetery, or I guess the trail if you want, is the iron, because you're going to need to be turning that into steel as soon as possible to upgrade your weapon. The benefit of the forest, like I mentioned, is you can get things like leather, you can get things like oriental grass if you need it. And of course, the benefit for a place like the cemetery would be you can start building up into the circlet. You can get both items for the circlet, and you can get the stone, which is going to be nice because, like I said, after this, we're going to be going over into the residential areas for the scrap metals, so you can basically build it off into the tiara right then and there. You can also get a feather right here, so if you want to go a little bit out of your way, you have the feather, you have the stone, and you make the glass pieces. Then you do have the option later to kind of go a little bit out of your way to the chapel, and you'll be able to make a really good headgear. You'll be able to make the tiara of light, which is just super nice kind of at all parts of the game. But I digress. So going back to it, like I said, once we have steel, we're going to be going over to the slum. Ideally the slum, because it's the most reliable residential area to get scrap metal. So we'll be going over to the slum. Slum is just, there's always a ton of really nice things to get from the slum. You're going to be getting the cloth to start building to the battle boots, because like you mentioned, where odds are we're going to be getting leather from the forest. If we started to there, if we didn't get leather, if we didn't go to the forest when we went to the cemetery, then we can make glass pieces, and then the next area we go, we're going to be basically fully upgrading, not fully upgrading, sorry, but upgrading all the way up to the Crystal Tiara. You can also get the cooking pot for if you did happen to have the inventory slots to carry food all the way from the pond. Like I mentioned, I'm going over kind of a lot of things kind of all over the place, but the reason is because, like I said, with offensive characters, you have to take what you can get. So I'm going over kind of a lot of things, and it might seem like you don't have the inventory slots to do what I'm talking about. It might sound like I'm just being crazy right here. You're like, yo, you're talking about bringing stuff from the pond, you're talking about doing stuff at the hotel, hospital, you're talking about getting items from the forest, the cemetery, you're talking about all these things. There's no way you have room for these inventory slots. And to that I say, yeah, of course, you're right. You don't have room for all these inventory slots. But as an offensive character, you have to take what you can get. So I'm talking about all these build-up options that you have for what you can potentially get. So like I said, from the slum, you can, if you have the turtle shells, and if you don't have the time to get the other things, because like I mentioned, you don't want to be spending too long in one area. That's like the only time you should stay in an area for a long period of time is when you're looking for an item that you need for your weapon, and there's like it's your only options to be going here for that. Like the other areas to find this item are maybe there's like one or two of that specific item in the area. So, or maybe they're being heavily contested and you can't get there. So the only time you should really put a lot of investment into a single location is for your weapon. Other than that, I just said this, but yeah, you take what you can get. So going back to it, like I said, the slums. Could give you the opportunity to build into your armor, into your armor, into your shield. If you can get, if you have the opportunity to get 2 scrap metals, that's going to give you 4 steels, which is going to be 1 for your weapon, 1 for your legs armor, 1 for your arm armor, and if you have the extra steel and you don't want to go too far out of your way, then your last steel can be used for basically whatever you want. Maybe an extra weapon if you want, although at the end of the day, I don't really think you have that time to make an extra weapon. I think, in general, the last steel does kind of go to waste, but what can you do? Oh, and obviously, of course, the cloths are going to be upgrading your doctor's gown as well. That's pretty important to mention as well. So it'll be upgrading with the doctor's gown. Now, you need the scissors to upgrade further from the doctor's gown. You can get scissors from the alley, you can get scissors from the hospital. So, like I mentioned, again, this comes down to playing based off what you can get. So if you get the scissors from the hospital and you have the inventory slots, then yeah, you're going to want to carry it from there. If you were forced out of the, if you weren't able to enter the hospital in the first place, or if you were forced out of the hospital after you already got the doctor's gown, you can be getting a lot of the items you need from the alley. And I really want to quickly touch on one more thing. Obviously, the ideal situation is you're going to be getting the doctor's gown, you're going to be getting a lot of recovery items from the hospital, but because of how heavily contested the hospital is, which is one of the reasons we like going to the hospital, if the hospital is so contested to the point where you can't go there, you're risking losing all your momentum based off basically just dying, then the alley also has a starting armor option as well. So like I mentioned, the hospital is going to have the doctor's gown way to start. The alley has the suit, and I don't like the suit. I don't really like it very much, but it's very quick, and if you are forced into the alley, then I have to mention it because, like I said, the whole purpose of kind of an offensive character, like I said, is playing off what you get. So if you do have to go to the alley, you can get the cotton work gloves there, and you can work into the arm. You can work into the suit instead of the other armor. Going back to it though, once you have the steel tonfa, you just have to go to one more area to fully upgrade it, which is kind of a nice reason why this beam tonfa is so nice, because it's so quick, because it's along high traffic routes, which basically is nice for your mastery, and it gives a lot of other additional building options as well. So the factory and the school are the final options. The school can give you scissors, which is important. Like I said, if you have the doctor's gown and you upgrade it and you don't get the scissors from the hospital, then you have the option to go to the school afterwards, get the scissors here. And the other option is the factory, which is going to be nice because it lets you upgrade your tiara when you get the wire. But basically what we're looking for at the end of the day here is the laser pointer, and that's going to be fully upgrading our weapon. Another kind of interesting thing to talk about is you can get the sniping scope from the factory. So if you want to kind of make use of Beam Tonfa's passive ability by kind of staying in normal stance more often, then the sniping scope is an option as well, just because it gives you that additional chance to find. It's 10%, and if you really want to make use of the Beam Tonfa's ability, you can just stay with the telescope and have the 20% as well. But the additional, I guess, armor is kind of nice for the sniping scope, so I think if you're there and you want to have an accessory, there's a free accessory for you right there. You'll have used the box by now, And if you haven't used the box by now, then it's not going to be used basically. But like I said, if the only other accessory you would have had in this slot is the box, and you basically should have used that when you're at the hospital. So at this point, you'll basically have the fully upgraded weapon. And that's basically everything for the route. That's actually basically everything for the guide, I suppose, in general. So hopefully I didn't kind of dwell too long on a few things with the route. I feel I get distracted a lot of times, and I feel I repeat myself a lot when I talk about routes, because I find there's a lot of information I always want to cover, a lot of information I always want to bring up, and I always find myself re-bringing up kind of the same information, so I always have kind of redundancies when I talk about kind of routes. So hopefully the gameplay in the background is going to be enough to kind of show the route in its entirety in general. I think the most important part for this section of the video, or the previous section of the video, because I guess I just finished it, but for that section of the video, the most important part is kind of seeing the route in action. So I find, as long as I have the gameplay up there, it should be fine in general. If you guys have any questions about anything I said, if I was kind of unclear about things, let me know, and I'll try to clarify. I do understand that I'm sometimes kind of hard to understand, I suppose, but anyways, getting sidetracked again. So that's basically the entirety of the guide. Silvia is a very, very fun character. She's basically, all offensive characters are fun. I love offensive characters. I'm not as good with them, but offensive characters are very, very fun, and they offer some of the funnest gameplay, both to participate in, obviously, as playing that character, but I find also, as well as a kind of a spectator, they're very fun to watch offensive characters, kind of the gameplay of offensive characters. So I really hope that this kind of lived up to, I wouldn't say it lived up to the hype, but like I said, I've been kind of working on this for a little while, so I hope people like it, I suppose, is what I'm basically trying to say. The next guide is confirmed to be Adriana, because I bought her when the new I bought her probably like a few days after she was released. I wouldn't say a week. Maybe almost a week, but maybe I don't think it was a full week. But I bought her a little while after it started, and I actually love her. She's so fun. So I definitely want to make a guide on her. I find her hard to work with, but I do think she's a fun character, and I think once people kind of get the nuances of her, I think she'll be a little bit better. She's definitely hard to use. But she's definitely a fun character. So yeah, she's the next one that's coming out. So if you are interested in that, keep an eye out on her. And I know there's a few other character guides that people asked for. So those are also on the old to-do list. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you guys for sticking by, and I'll see you next time.
Like a Hellcat. Faster. Coming like a Hellcat.